Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So today I want to talk about Prosus. Okay, we just got done watching an incredible interview with Everything Money and Mohnish Pabrai, where Pabrai told us point blank he sold Alibaba in order to buy Prosus. Look at how serious he is there about Prosus. And a lot of you have reached out to me and want to know what is the difference between PROSY and PRX, right? So Pabrai said in this interview he doesn't think Prosus trades in the U.S. Turns out it does, but clearly because he didn't know, it means he bought through the Amsterdam exchange, which is PRX. So in this video, I'm going to share, what I see as the differences between these two issues. I spent some time on the phone today with Fidelity, who is my broker, and I had a conversation about this. So this is hot off the press. So here we go. I made some notes about the different issues. So PROSY is an ADR that trades in the over-the-counter market. Okay, it's a fractional ADR. And you can see this if you go to this website. This is adrbankofnewyorkmellon.com. They talk about the fees. They talk about a bunch of different things related to PROSY, okay? And the reason they have all this information is because Bank of New York Mellon is the sponsor for this ADR, okay? Just like in a previous video, I talked about Alibaba and how Citibank was the sponsor for that. It's actually called an ADS for Alibaba. Prosus is an ADR sponsored by the Bank of New York Mellon. At least if you buy it through Fidelity, that's who the sponsor is. And it's great. It's great that this is a sponsored ADR as opposed to an unsponsored ADR. Makes it less risky that it's sponsored by a financial institution like the Bank of New York Mellon. So one thing to note right off the bat here is this ratio. The ratio of depository receipts to ordinary shares is 5-to-1. And so a lot of you have been asking me, why is PROSY 1/5 the price of PRX listed in Amsterdam? And it's because of this 5-to-1 ratio. Okay, it's because PROSY is a fractional ADR in a ratio of 5-to-1. And a big question I had: what are the fees? Right? What does it cost to own PROSY versus owning PRX on the Amsterdam exchange? So for PROSY, as an ADR, there's an ADR custodial fee. Okay, and this is something that's charged from the Bank of New York Mellon. It says up to 5 cents per ADR. Okay, so I'm just going to assume they charge that whole 5 cents. It may be less, but this is a 5 cent per year fee. Okay, a custodial fee that's going to be charged every year that you're holding this PROSY ADR. There's a currency conversion fee for dividends. So when Prosus pays out dividends to owners of PROSY, there's going to be a currency conversion fee, right? Because they're going to be issued in euros because it's on the Amsterdam exchange. So in order for it to show up as US dollars in your US brokerage account, there's going to be a currency conversion fee. So those are really the two fees I think that are most notable. I also mentioned the liquidity here. So 600,000 shares trade daily. That's sort of an average over the last 3 months for PROSY, which is pretty significant for an over-the-counter stock. And then if we look really quick at PRX listed on the Amsterdam exchange, the liquidity is about 2.4 million shares traded daily. Now, if we consider that there's this 5-to-1 ratio, this is like 20x the dollar volume more for PRX than for PROSY. Okay, so that's notable. You know, if you've got very deep pockets, you may be more interested in PRX just because there's so much more liquidity. What else? So we can go through an example here. Okay, let's say you've got a $10,000 investment that you want to invest in Prosus. What would your charges be investing in PROSY versus investing in PRX? So really this custodial fee is going to be about $30 a year, okay? Because it's 5 cents per ADR. With the $10,000 investment, you got about 604 ADRs that you're buying based on the current share price, which at 5 cents per ADR converts to $30 per year. Now, if you're buying PRX, that's with Fidelity, it's going to be 19 euros per trade. Okay, so I buy $10,000 worth of PRX. I've got to pay about 22 US dollars for that trade commission. And then I've got this currency conversion fee of 1% up front. So this applies whether I'm buying PRX or whether I'm selling PRX. I have to pay this currency conversion fee. So you've got $10,000 investment, $22 trade commission, and $100 currency conversion fee. Okay, so 122 versus 30 a year is what this works out to. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting, European exchanges are single share lots. Okay, so often, you know, when I've bought on the Japanese exchange, when I've bought in Turkey, you're forced to buy these 100 lot shares in 100, you know, multiples. Okay, you can't buy one share. You have to buy 100 or 200 or 300 or, you know, any multiple of 100. For the European exchanges, you can buy single shares, just like you can in the U.S., which is great. So there's no limitations there with PRX. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to cover from here. Let me see if there's anything else directly from the Bank of New York Mellon that I wanted to talk about. So if you can look at depository receipt details over here on the right-hand side. You see over-the-counter market, 5-to-1, country South Africa. Depository sponsored, I guess that's probably Bank of New York Mellon. That's their code there. There's also this tab for fees here. Okay, so you see all these potential fees that could play into primarily selling, or I guess redeeming in some cases. You can convert these ADSs or ADRs into shares, you know, directly with, in this case, the Amsterdam exchange. There would be a cancellation fee that would apply in that situation. So there's all kinds of stuff down here that you guys can dig into, but I think I covered kind of the big stuff. One question I had in terms of, so there's been all kinds of talk lately about delisting, right? DD was delisted. There's a lot of fear in the markets about BABA being delisted. I was a little bit curious, you know, buying PROSY. Obviously, you know, the company is not a Chinese company. It's headquartered in Amsterdam, but the main holding of this holding company that is Prosus is a Chinese company, right? It's a Chinese tech company, Tencent. So, you know, one thought that went through my mind, is there any larger delisting risk owning PROSY than there would be for owning something like PRX? And the guy I was talking to through Fidelity didn't think so, didn't think that would be a factor, but the thought crossed my mind. If you guys watched my video on BABA delisting, you probably know I'm not very concerned about delistings. And I think given this is the over-the-counter market, I think there's much less risk of a delisting. Even if it was a Chinese company directly, like Tencent trades in the over-the-counter market, much less risk with the OTC markets than something like the New York Stock Exchange or, one of these larger markets where the SEC reporting requirements are just significantly more stringent. So I thought about that. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to talk about in terms of PROSY versus PRX. I do own Prosus through PROSY. And it's not something I put a lot of thought into when I bought it. But going through this exercise, made me even more comfortable owning PROSY. It seems like Pabrai and Guy Spear both bought through Amsterdam, so the ticker PRX. So if any of you guys have thoughts about potential risks between these two different issues, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I also wanted to just mention, because I mentioned this in one of my comments on one of these Everything Money videos with Mohnish Pabrai, that there's a number of great investors who have bought into Prosus, which most of us aren't going to be familiar with if we haven't been following Prosus, because this stuff isn't going to show up in 13F filings. So we know Pabrai and Spear, they both talked about it in recent Q&A sessions. I think Spear with the Kolkata Value Investors Club, he talked about Prosus, and Pabrai talked a lot about it in his lecture at Boston College. So check those out if you want to hear more from either of them on, their thesis for Prosus. Rob Vinal is an investor in Switzerland, runs RV Capital. He's had a very solid track record. He's an investor I'm paying more and more attention to. But right here, I'm going to link to this. You can see he wrote a letter to his investors back in July of 2020. Okay, so about a year and a half ago. He doesn't do quarterly letters. He does half-year letters, so 2 letters a year. And he talks quite a bit about Prosus in this letter. So first he talks about Tencent, because that's really the basis of his interest in Prosus, is to have exposure to Tencent. But he talks about why invest via Prosus. And I got a lot out of this section, so check that out if you're interested. Sequoia Fund spoke about Prosus in their Q3 portfolio review. So I'll link to that as well. I think it starts at like 9 minutes, and it's just 2 or 3 minutes talking about Prosus and China risk and all of that. So check that out. Sequoia is definitely one of the kind of guru funds that I track closely. So I'm excited to see that they're invested in Prosus. And then Jean-Pierre Verster is a guy I came across. He runs a fund, I believe, in South Africa. And this was when I was trying to wrap my head around the whole Naspers Prosus share swap situation. And he speaks about that in this interview. It's like a radio piece, 12 and a half minutes. So check this out from Jean-Pierre Verster. I've also reached out to him on Twitter about Prosus, and he's been responsive. So I think if you do some homework, you ask him an intelligent question, you may get some response from him. So, of course, don't all blast him with messages on Twitter, or he'll probably quickly turn off that direct message feature. But another great resource for learning about Prosus. So yeah, I think that's all I've got for today, guys. It's very exciting to get confirmation from Pabrai that he is in fact invested in Prosus. It's how I imagined that he was attacking Tencent, but it's great to know for sure. So hopefully you guys enjoy these additional resources if you are also looking into Prosus, and let me know, what you've found around Prosus that maybe I haven't come across yet. Because of course I want to continuously deepen my understanding of both Prosus and Tencent as a current shareholder. So without further ado, guys, thanks for watching as always, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.